Hello and welcome to Buildings of Tomorrow. My name is John Lester, and in today's episode, we are talking about Project Haystack. We're actually continuing a conversation together with Gareth and Scott around Project Haystack and Haystack Connect. So, as I mentioned, I'm really lucky to be joined today by two special guests, Gareth Johnson, the Chief Software Architect at J2 Innovations, and Scott Muench, the VP of Customer Experience at J2 Innovations. Gareth, Scott, thanks so much for joining us.
Hello, thank you.
Thank you very much.
We had a great conversation not long ago where we really talked about Project Haystack, and you introduced really clearly some of the value, some of the secret sauce behind Project Haystack, what it is, and importantly, Scott, what it's not, and talked a little bit about what that enables us to do. For anyone out there that had the opportunity to listen to that episode, I'm sure they're excited to understand what's new, what's the latest with Project Haystack, because these projects, these models, these collections of technologies don't happen overnight. It's a community that takes time to really build and grow. And recently we had Haystack Connect, if I understand correctly. And I wanted to ask you both, and maybe Gareth, we start with you, to give us quickly your impressions, your thoughts, how you felt during that conference and during the conversation.
Oh, I absolutely loved it. I mean, it was a wonderful conference. I attended during the time of COVID. I attended a virtual Haystack Connect, but there's nothing like being there in person. And I think with what's really important with an open standard like Haystack is seeing the activity behind it. Because you can have open standards, but they fizzle out, or there's not much to them, or there's not much activity around them and stuff. And I think what we saw with Haystack Connect this year, it was some real innovation, some real activity and buzz, and a lot of motivation to improve the standard, to develop new tools around the standard, and really move us forward in a very constructive way. And I even to the extent where I kind of saw different people trying to, there's some various issues that people are trying to resolve, and there was some very, very healthy discussions in perhaps different perspectives as well on how to solve some of those issues too. And I find that debate very engaging, and I thought that was shows the hallmarks of a very healthy and lively standard, and that's people are innovating upon. So I was really, really pleased with it.
Amazing. And Scott, for you?
Yeah, for me, it was particularly kind of memorable in the sense that it's 10 years. Project Haystack was founded over 10 years ago, and I was at that very first conference. And I remember using words like imagine and in the future, we hope for, and things like that. And now you fast forward to 10 years later, and one of the messages was Haystack in the real world. And session after session after session was use cases and products and services and people saying how they're leveraging it. It was really neat to see that maturity and that penetration into the ecosystem and the creative ideas that people are using. I just came away with, wow, this has got a lot of really solid traction. There are people that are building entire careers as well as products and companies on it. I remember one that was very memorable where there was actually a company, almost like a religion, a company standard, if you will, that everything they do will be based on data. And that was like the unifying factor. And then all the other things around the company were built to support that central focus. So that was just amazing to see. Other things that I saw was some of the energy looking forward, which is some of the topics we can talk about today, that it continues to evolve, and it continues to evolve in a really positive way.
Perfect. Hey, from both of you, I hear a lot of excitement. I hear a lot of energy. And as you mentioned, Gareth, there are many standards, and there have been many standards, and some of them thrive and flourish, and some of them fade and die, let's call it, to put it bluntly. And it's great to hear that the Project Haystack and the Haystack approach is not one of those. Really starting to become real, as you mentioned, Scott, and really starting to find traction, that people building careers. This is quite a of revelation, let's call it, that something is really becoming a powerful force. Now, as you mentioned, Scott, excuse me, something like Project Haystack is never finished. It continues to grow. It looks towards the future. And there's a couple of projects that I know both of you found a lot of energy and excitement in, and that we wanted to talk a little bit about today. There's Building Motif and Zito. Let's start with Zito. I think, Scott, something that you particularly connected with during that conference.
Yeah, indeed, because kind of my background as a system integrator role was about trying to get jobs done in an efficient way, get them done accurately so there's no mistakes. And standards help because it got the devices talking to each other. And in the early days, we used naming conventions, but boy, standards have taken it to the next level with what we call templates, for instance, in the Fin framework. And as we look at the Project Haystack relative to that focus, in Haystack 4.0, there was a concept called protos or prototypes. And so imagine a model of a VAV is now well defined and it has these points: discharge air, damper, actuator, hot water valve, as an example. So we all agree to agree not only to the standard of what metadata gets added to those points, but now how they get assembled into a bigger entity. And this is really significant when it comes to actually creating solutions that are easy to use and not time consuming. And it also opens the door to democratization, which we talked about in the earlier episode, where you have this kind of plug and play because those templates enable that. And what this leads up to is the next level of that concept, which is Project Zeto. The idea there is there's a concept called specs, and a spec is really kind of the next generation of a prototype, where not only is it defined in the standard, but it's actually defined in the programming tools. So there's actually a reference design that can be extended through various languages. And so if you're a developer or if you're a user of a tool set, you could actually grab one of these specs from a library called VAVs, and it would have inheritance all the way back down the tool chain to the standard. So there's no room for interpretation. It's always going to be right, which is just really cool. And then the other side of that, which is probably the more important rather than the technical, is the business side of it. These these libraries of specifications would be readily available to be used in validation tools. So part of Project Zeto, which is funded by the Department of Energy here in the United States, is to come up with a validation capability for tagged and semantically tagged data. And so imagine you're able to engineer a job using these templates. So generally, it's going to be almost 100% right. If you, for some reason, mess something up, you would run it through this validation software, and it would say, "Hey, you forgot this tag, Scott," or "This relationship needs to be reinforced." And so in my mind, it's kind of like where we are going with some of the device standards, like BTL verifies that this device talks to this device. But when we get to the data model, what we're talking about is this data model talks to these applications in a standard way, and now we can validate it. And so stay tuned. It's a multi-year project, and we're just kind of getting started with the first kind of iteration of the technology. But I think there's room for excitement there because it's a natural evolution of our industry.
And quite an undertaking, I imagine.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, Zito is. I think Scott gave a very, very good introduction on what Zito is there, and I think the two main takeaways from it are it enables you to elegantly define a shape of something. You know, so if we're talking about that VAV, we're talking about all the the inputs and outputs, everything it's got connected to that VAV, and we're describing a shape of something. And once we've just elegantly be able to describe a shape of something, we can validate that data. And data validation is critically important. It's the thing when you've got something like Haystack or any data model, to be honest with you, you need to make sure that the way those tags have been used, that they are being used in the correct way and there's nothing missing, because if there's something missing it could cause problems if you're running like a control algorithm against something to solve a particular problem. That data is important. It needs consistency is really important. So forming shapes and validating data that's there, so you have a consistent data model that is not full of errors and so forth, not missing anything, is really important. And that's what Zito really is, because it's difficult. As you need a good set of tools and technologies. Where even if you're a software developer, you need some way to be able to visualize these shapes. So Zito kind of helps address that as well. The specs that you were talking about there, Scott, they give an elegant way that you can kind of define what these shapes are. And that's something I haven't seen in Haystack before, to be honest with you. The Haystack 4 had something called defs as well. It's a little bit more difficult to use when defining a shape of something. It's like when J2, when we work with a new customers, they want to be able to model different things in different ways sometimes. So having a better way to be able to do that data modeling and validation is something that Zito provides. So again, it's very good. This again, hopefully to your SIs and out there, this will be something which is just the tools that you use. Again, it's a technology that you don't necessarily need to go out and understand yourself, but you will be able to understand the benefits by having really first class templating so you can engineer jobs easier and quicker, and also having validation tools to make sure that all the data that you've got there is valid too. So I think it offers some really interesting possibilities for our industry. I think there's one thing that does get missed from Zito as well. It offers simplified querying as well. So once you've got that data model validated, another really nice feature of it is that it really does make querying that data a lot easier too.
Yeah, that's a good point, because we've talked about different personas, and we often say the data scientist or the analyst and so forth, and they're really good with queries. They've kind of figured out the syntax. But there's other audiences like end users, system integrator, and energy managers, and for them to be able to use kind of plain English, give me all the energy usage caused by my chiller plant feeding my chill water coils. Um, those are plain English specs that could be pulled out into a query through the tools utilizing Zeto. So excellent point.
And a huge step forward. As you say, not only do you have this technology that sits in the background that supports people through that engineering process, the commissioning process, the verification means that then what is deployed is really working and connected how it should be. But if you start to also deliver through that operational phase, the poor person who has to look after the security system and the lighting system and the building management system and cut keys and let people in after hours can also use plain English to find out some information is a huge step beyond what you described at the start, Scott, which was naming conventions, because often naming conventions are actually quite cryptic. And they don't always help you find the information unless you're inside in the in crowd somehow, and you know what these conventions mean. Gareth, you had some projects also that you're interested in. I think you mentioned one building motif to us. Could you give us an introduction there of that project?
Sure. Well, first of all, there was many different projects. Project Haystack. One of them was building motif. I thought that was really, really interesting, which is a building metadata ontology interoperability framework. And yeah, I know it's a big mouthful, isn't it? But the first thing to understand about Zito is, it's got some very, very powerful tools for doing data validation. It simplifies quite a few things in order to do that data validation. Works really well with Haystack. But it's important to also acknowledge the fact that outside the world of Haystack, there's this thing called the semantic web. Where people have already kind of have other solutions for kind of data modeling using something like RDF. and also validation as well. Like the shape constraint language as well enables you to kind of shackle to
Shackle, yes, I love these acronyms.
I know, but they are for those technologies are very much for the data scientists and so forth. There's quite a lot to them, and I think Zito as a software developer is a little bit more approachable in my opinion. Haystack is very much a software developer practitioner's toolkit, shall we say, which is great. But a building motif, from what I've seen now, it brings in Haystack, it brings in Brick, it brings in that technology together just to try and make it a bit easier to work with standardized semantic data. It's really trying to bridge the gap between these popular ontologies. So that was very, very interesting. So it was good to kind of see some different perspectives on data validation, and it's very, very important to kind of acknowledge that there are multiple technologies out there that do this. And I think especially for the data scientist crowd, that's really important. So that's something that's evolving and developing all the time, which I find interesting. Another thing which was really cool to see, which I love to see at the Haystack Connect conference, are the different working groups, because there's always new tags, and it's really great for people to be able to stand up and kind of describe their working group, what they've been doing, and the problem they're trying to solve, and really make everyone aware of that conversation, because not everyone's involved in every working group. So it's good to kind of hear it, straight from the horse's mouth, really, on the problem they're trying to solve and why. And I think those contributions as well are always very, very welcome, and really add to a very well-rounded conference in terms of the technology. You've got something like Zito, which was the big new shiny thing, but there's many, many other things happening in Haystack as well, which are really exciting, and if not equally as important overall to the overall direction of the standard.
And understand. And the last question I had for both of you, and I already know the answer. How does the future look? All of these exciting projects, all of these developments, whether they're the big revolutionary functionality, whether it's the small thing that fills a gap that makes the overall project more robust. How does the future feel for you? And how does the excitement build after a conference like this for next year and the year after, as you start to see some of these work groups really finalize their activities and bring this into the standard? Scott, let's start with you.
I think the biggest word that came into mind for me was collaboration. Right after the Connect event, the Haystack Connect event, was another major industry trade show, and I sat on a panel, and I had Brick, I had the labs, I had ASHRAE, all the different standard bodies all agreeing and shaking their head up and down saying, yes, this needs to happen. And so let's all come together. Let's find all of our similarities, because there's a ton of them. Let's leverage our unique pieces that we have that might be market or audience specific. And let's ignore the bloggers that use words like protocol wars or data wars or things like that, because that's just hype. That's not the reality. Sitting on this panel, I could feel the cooperation. I could feel the positive energy across all different angles to this problem. So if that's one word, cooperation is really what the future is about.
Thank you, Scott.
Yeah.
Same for you, Gareth.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with Scott. I think cooperation is critically important there. I think there is definitely a lot of people motivated in trying to share data and coming to a standard there, especially with everything that's happening with the climate crisis. There's a great motivation to be able to do that. I also think there's kind of what I saw with Zito as well was the idea of building these templates, these shapes of data into a library as well. I think sharing that and making that openly available, I thought was a really good idea. And that's kind of outside of Zito, I would say. It's kind of more of a website, or websites that would run where you could kind of access kind of Zito specs and utilize them in your tools. But the idea again there is sharing and making it easier and to engineer and commission these systems, having a better understanding about how they're tagged and so forth, and dealing with all that. So I think that's definitely more templating and easier to commission there using this technology is something I see there also. But it was definitely a lot of positivity around kind of moving those standards forward and a greater working together there, and everyone being aware of it, far more aware than ever. That tree offers a large amount of value, and it's critically important that we're not just going to have Haystack, we're not just going to have brick. We have got these different standards, and in Siemens we've got like different ontologies for different Siemens across the whole Siemens business as well. So there is real motivation to understand how to use those technologies and have them bring together and work together to deliver an enormous amount of value.
Yeah, I understand. And hey, for the last comment from me, I think similar to communication protocols, these standards, many exist because there are many applications. And you mentioned that, Scott, different target audiences, different purposes, different industries, different vertical applications. So the natural requirement of these different parts of the industry will develop different requirements and therefore different standards. So there is no one answer to all those questions. But the collaboration is the opportunity for us to leverage all of those unique pieces, as you mentioned, and also recognize and collaborate on the similarities to find clear ways through this, like we do in so many other cases across the industry. Scott, Gareth, thanks so much. Second conversation. I feel like we should have some more, to be honest, but that's not my call. That's yours. But hey, thanks so much for today, for sharing your time and sharing your expertise. It's really much appreciated.
Always a pleasure. Real fun time.
You're welcome.
And also a huge thank you to anyone who is listening out there. Please remember to like, share, comment this episode. Remember to subscribe, whichever platform you found this episode on. Remember to check out the first discussion I had together with Scott and Gareth if you're interested in a little bit more of the fundamentals and the starting point when we talk about Project Haystack. But apart from that, also keep your eyes out every 2 to 3 weeks, new episodes talking about all new things and all things buildings and infrastructure moving forward. So thank you so much for spending your time with us as well, and we'll see you very soon.